The spread and effects of industrialization. How did the Industrial Revolution spread? It spread to the United States because, like England, the United States had rivers that could supply power. It had extensive coal and iron ore deposits, and it had a large number of workers, both farmers and immigrants, who could work in factories. The textile industry developed first, followed by technical innovations and inventions, and the railroad system expanded to more easily transport resources and goods. In continental Europe, the spread was slower, in large part due to the Napoleonic Wars of the early 1800s. The wars blocked trade, they made communication more difficult, and spending on the wars caused inflation and limited investment opportunities. Once industrialization began in Europe, it was more regional and sporadic. Some regions concentrated or specialized in certain goods, and other regions really didn't experience industrialization until much later. What ideas emerged because of industrialization? First, we're going to talk about economic philosophies. And the first economic philosophy is the idea of laissez-faire, or hands-off economics. And this is the idea that the government should not interfere with business and free trade, and it should allow the market to operate without restriction. This is the basis of capitalism, which says that factors of production should be privately owned and managed to maximize profits. In other words, a free market economy. People who support this theory oppose government efforts to help the poor because creating minimum wage laws and better working conditions restricts the operation of the free market, lowers profits, and undermines the production of wealth. Basically, under laissez-faire economics, the market should be able to operate as it will, with supply and demand determining price. Another economic philosophy that emerged is socialism, and it has several different varieties. The first is called utilitarianism, which is basically the idea that people should judge ideas and actions on the basis of their usefulness to society. The government's role is to promote the greatest good for the greatest number of people, and ordinary working people need policies that lead to a more equal division of profits. This theory also supported the idea of reforms in the legal and the prison systems and in education. The second socialist philosophy is utopianism, or the idea that people could create a model perfect society on earth. This is based on cooperative communities that are founded to benefit all, and it features things like keeping rent low, prohibiting child labor, and offering free schooling to everyone. Probably the most well-known socialist philosophy is a radical socialism or communism. This idea was originated by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, and it supports the theory that human societies have always been divided into two classes: the haves, or the employers, and the have-nots, or the workers, and this division leads to conflict. The radical socialists argued that the Industrial Revolution enriched the wealthy and impoverished the poor to the point that workers would unite and revolt against the rich. After the workers' revolution, a new classless society would be established, and the people collectively would own all the means of production, and private property would cease to exist. Ideally, they said, all goods and services would be shared equally. In reality, this doesn't really work out the way that they thought, although the idea of radical socialism does spawn several revolutions later in history in places like Russia and China. What reforms emerged because of industrialization? The labor union movement organized to help workers bargain with their employers for better working conditions and higher pay. And when workers' demands were not met, they often went on strike and stopped working so that they could force the employers to negotiate with them. There was also working conditions reforms in the later period of the Industrial Revolution, with restrictions on child labor, a ban on children and women working in more dangerous areas like mines, and restrictions on the number of hours in the workday. Also, there was the abolition of slavery, or the outlawing of the slave trade and the institution of slavery itself. In Britain, slavery was outlawed in 1833, and in the United States in 1865. The abolition of slavery came much later in Puerto Rico, Cuba, and Brazil. Women's rights, the work for higher wages for women. On average, at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, women only earned about a third of what men earned, and also working to get the right to vote for women. And finally, reforms in education, where free public schools could be offered to all children. So, a summary of industrialization. While industrialization eventually helps everyone, the gap does widen between rich and poor nations. Europe became much more powerful, mostly at the expense of regions in Asia and Africa. And as more factories are built and more goods are produced, the demand in rich nations for resources and for markets increases. This is going to lead these rich nations to try and colonize other areas so that they'll have access to more natural resources and be able to sell their manufactured goods to people living in those areas. That's going to be our next ism, the topic of imperialism. If you need to rewind or rewatch any of this video, please feel free to do so. Thanks for listening.